After 8 years of marriage, I met my first love and asked my billionaire husband for a divorce. I took the $200 million worth of assets my ex-husband gave me and remarried for love, but I never expected that man to take me abroad, brutally murder me, and then return home to inherit everything. On the 7th day after my death, my grave was deserted. Only my ex-husband came to offer me a bouquet of white roses. When I opened my eyes again, I was back to the day I met my first love. 1. Madam, which one do you prefer for tonight, this Chanel-style suit or this Hermes silk dress? I'll take it out for ironing. The nanny's voice woke me from my dream. I was lying on the sofa at home, covered with the light blanket Ethan had put on me before leaving. Ethan was my husband. We had been married for 8 years, and he was as gentle and considerate to me as ever. Over the years, he had worked hard to grow the company into a multi-billion-dollar corporation, enough for me to live a life of luxury for 10 lifetimes. I had a dedicated driver and a Rolls-Royce Phantom, and each season, luxury brands sent me new clothes and bags to choose from. When I didn't have time, I had 2 dedicated fitting models with almost the same figure as me to try on clothes. 4 of the 12 rooms in the house were specifically for my personal belongings. 3 Michelin chefs alternated to cook for me, and 6 nannies and a butler arranged my daily life in an orderly manner. On my wrist, I wore the jade bracelet in imperial green that Ethan had specially chosen for me yesterday for my birthday, worth a building. My health was weak, and I didn't want to have children, so Ethan said that being childless was fine. He was very content with our life together. But it was precisely me, who was so well taken care of, that I was going to ask him for a divorce tomorrow. 2. Yes, soon, because I was reborn. In my past life, my dedicated driver had taken a day off on this day, and the butler had hired a temporary driver for me. And tonight, I was going to accompany Ethan to a charity gala, and this driver was responsible for taking me there. This driver was my first love from high school. At that time, I was young and beautiful, and he was cool and individualistic. After being a good girl for 18 years, I was attracted to him, unexpectedly but reasonably so. Later, my parents and teachers found out about it and forcibly transferred me to another school, severing contact. Ethan was the spouse my father had chosen for me. He was good, really, but he couldn't give me that feeling of excitement. Thus, after an unexpected separation and a reunion after many years, I decided to follow my heart for once in my 30-odd years. Anyway, my parents had passed away, and no one could stop me. I passionately kissed him in the back seat of the Phantom in the dark underground parking lot, and 10 minutes before the gala started, I adjusted my clothes, went upstairs, and took Ethan's arm to enter the venue. After returning home, my mind was still filled with that person's slightly weathered and heart-wrenching figure, so when Ethan wanted to be intimate with me, I pushed him away. I'm sorry, I'm not feeling well today, I said, forcing an explanation in the face of Ethan's somewhat surprised gaze. But he was as tolerant as ever, gently massaging my lower abdomen, his deep voice carrying a unique sense of pampering. Is it that time of the month? Then get some rest early. I'll take you to see Dr. G tomorrow when I have time. Dr. G was a well-known traditional Chinese medicine doctor in the country. Ethan paid him an annual salary of $300,000 to buy 1 day of his time each week to regulate my health all year round. But he didn't get to take me. Because the next day, I asked him for a divorce. 3. I don't know why, but I feel like this life is a bit boring. You must feel the same way, right? Every day, you either come home to watch dramas with me, have dinner, and take a walk, or you work day after day. Besides, my colleagues are all joking that they've never seen a big boss with your wealth who's willing to be childless. Ethan, find someone who loves you, like you love me, and loves you enough to have children for you. I'm sorry to you. Ethan was silent for a long time before saying in a deep voice, okay. Then, in just 1 month, he arranged everything, giving me assets worth $200 million, including a house and a car. When we came out of the Civil Affairs Bureau that day, he gently hugged me, his clear voice with a hint of choking. I can't wish you happiness, but I respect all your decisions. Later, I got together with that person. I bought him a house and a car, paid for his parents' medical expenses, bought his sister a college degree, and even gave her $1.8 million in advance as a dowry. He was very happy, cooking for me personally. Simple stir-fried vegetables and carrot soup, but with a unique, homely flavor. A sense of normalcy that I had never felt in these 8 years. After spending 3 months together, we got our marriage license and became legal husband and wife. For our honeymoon, I chose an island abroad and booked a detached hot spring villa, wanting to have a sweet half-month with him. But on the 3rd day there, I was forced to be swept away by the rip current. Yes, forced. That person pressed my head down hard until I was floating in the sea, unable to move, and was carried away by the seawater. When I was found, it had been half a month. My body was gnawed beyond recognition, and I could only be identified by DNA. That person cried uncontrollably on the plane back home, but after landing, he hastily buried me and then inherited all my assets. On the 7th day after my death, my grave was deserted, with mud everywhere, and even passers-by frowned and avoided it. Only Ethan, holding a bouquet of white roses, came through the mud, and he, who had always been calm and composed, knelt in front of my grave and burst into tears. 4. Madam, the nanny called me again. I came back to my senses and pointed to the cloakroom. None of those, I want that dark green cheongsam. It was custom-made for me by Ethan, who wanted to give me a surprise to match my bracelet, but I disliked it because of the color. The nanny was puzzled. Didn't you say last night that Mr. Smith has a straight man's aesthetic and must have made it look bad? I smiled. I misjudged it last night. The nanny muttered as she walked over. Actually, I thought it looked good too. It complements your temperament so well. It cost hundreds of thousands of dollars to make. The material is really good. I slowly stood up from the sofa, drank a cup of tea to suppress the shock and excitement in my heart, and then put on the cheongsam. Heaven has eyes, and being reborn has finally made me realize what is good, what is right. My phone rang. It was Ethan's call. Honey, the driver's here. Go ahead first, I'll join you after my meeting. I replied gently, okay. I hung up, but my face immediately darkened. The butler was puzzled. Madam, what's wrong? Nothing, just change the driver. I didn't want to see that disgusting face again. But the butler said, I can't find another one on such short notice, and besides, there's no time. Can you make do with it? Then call me a private car. I used to be picky and didn't like taking ride-sharing cars. Besides, Ethan had spoiled me, and I had never driven myself. But now, as long as I didn't see him again, anything was fine. The butler had no choice but to call me a private car temporarily. But the car was stopped by the property management outside the complex and couldn't enter. I had to walk 20 minutes to get there. I'd walk, so what if I ruined a pair of high heels? But when I went out with my bag, that person was already standing awkwardly by the car, his face stiffening when he saw me. I ignored him and continued walking. The man's voice came from behind, filled with helplessness. Scarlett, I'm sorry, I didn't know it was you. But I really need this $200 daily wage to pay for my dad's medical bills this week. Back then, he was the campus bully, cool and arrogant, with no one else in his eyes but me. When had he ever pleaded with someone like this? My footsteps faltered, and for some reason, I felt a pang of bitterness. 5. But this bitterness was not for him, nor for myself. In my past life, half of the assets that Ethan had worked so hard to earn were given to this person so easily. I satisfied his greed and my selfishness but trampled on Ethan's sincere heart. The butler's voice pulled me back to reality. Madam, the private car driver has cancelled the order. What do you think? The villa area was too remote, and it was not easy to get a taxi. Ordinary people naturally wanted to take the next order as soon as possible to earn some money. The nannies couldn't drive luxury cars, afraid of causing accidents. The butler could drive, but he had just slipped on the stairs a few days ago, and his right foot was still a bit lame. Although he could walk, driving was difficult. It took 40 minutes to drive from here to the venue, but there was only a little over an hour before the event started. I needed to check in early and meet up with Ethan. I gritted my teeth, pushed the man away, and wanted to get into the driver's seat myself. But he grabbed my arm. Miss Scarlett, let me do it. Chase Evans, let go. The butler and he looked at me awkwardly. After a long while, he slowly let go. The butler said worriedly, Madam, be careful. Chase Evans clenched his hands tightly, his voice with a hint of pleading. It's only a few minutes, I'll try to drive faster. Yes, only 40 minutes, what was I afraid of? I could go back with Ethan. Taking a deep breath, I turned around and got into the back seat. The two of them breathed a sigh of relief, and Chase Evans immediately got into the car and drove me to the venue. Along the way, I quietly looked out the window, not saying a word. A faint scent of rose drifted into my nose, carrying a romantic atmosphere. The soothing light music eased some of the awkward atmosphere. Halfway there, Chase Evans tentatively opened his mouth. How have you been these years? I snorted coldly, can't you see? Chase Evans pondered for a moment before saying softly, Actually, I looked for you back then. Enough. I didn't want to hear any more. But my breathing couldn't help but become a little rapid, and I felt a little hot. Something was wrong, very wrong. My eyes immediately fell on the fragrance in the car. 6. No wonder I couldn't control myself so much in my previous life. I thought it was because of the excitement of meeting an old friend and doing something wrong in a daze. Now it seemed that Chase Evans had been prepared all along. Stop the car. I had to leave the small and confined space immediately. But Chase Evans didn't stop. Scarlett, we're on the highway, we can't stop. I glanced at the navigation. It was 15 minutes to the destination, but it would take 13 minutes to get off the highway. Cover the incense and put it in the armrest box, I said coldly. Chase Evans's back stiffened for a moment, but he did as he was told. The short 15 minutes felt like 15 years to me. As soon as the car arrived at the venue, I immediately slammed the door and got out of the car. Chase Evans sat in the driver's seat, looking at me through the car window, his eyes seeming to carry a hint of sorrow. But I didn't bother to pay attention. I searched for Ethan's figure in the crowd. Finally, I saw the familiar, tall and straight back in a black suit. "Honey," I said, hurrying forward and linking my arm with his, my eyes smiling. "Scarlett?" Ethan looked at me with a hint of surprise but quickly restrained himself. "What's wrong?" I nestled against him affectionately. "Aren't you happy to see me?" Ethan's stern face immediately showed a hint of a smile. "Of course not. I just didn't expect you to wear this." I shook the bracelet on my wrist, indicating that what I was wearing was not just clothes, but also his deep but restrained love for me. We walked towards the check-in table amidst the envious gazes of the people. Outside the hall behind us, Chase Evans slowly closed the car window, isolating his gloomy face. 7. At the gala, Ethan and I were still the focus of the crowd. His technology company occupied half of the market with its leading chip technology in the country, and there was a long queue of people eager to cooperate. And I, with my beautiful appearance, excellent temperament, a decent associate professor title from a key university, and enjoying Ethan's unique favor, was also the object of jealousy of all the ladies present. After returning home, I leaned on Ethan's shoulder and helped him take off his suit. As expected, his eyes darkened, and he carried me to the bed. After the lovemaking, I lay in his solid arms, watching a cheesy Thai drama. He put his arm around me with one hand, and the other hand was replying to work messages. I glanced at it. It was from the group's vice president, Jane E. She was Ethan's classmate from the same school, also from a famous high education background. She was a well-known strong woman since her student days, dedicated to her career, and claimed that men would only affect the speed of her drawing her sword. She didn't want to get married, so she went abroad to do IVF. Before giving birth, she was still wearing a hospital gown and chairing a meeting at the company. Now, she was responsible for the group's overseas business, so there was often a time difference, and she often needed to exchange work information with Ethan in the middle of the night. Ethan didn't suspect me and let me look for a while, then smiled and stroked my long hair. "What's wrong? Want to join the company too?" It was just a joke, but I looked up at him. "Can I?" Ethan obviously didn't expect that I would actually have this idea and raised his eyebrows. "Did someone at work upset you again?" He knew how to support his wife. When I first joined the job, someone spread rumors about me at school, and Ethan directly donated 2 buildings to the school. I nestled in his arms, and remembering Chase Evans' disgusting face, I said with a bit of guilt in a low voice, "I just feel like I give you too little company and love." He put down his phone, cupped my face, and kissed me lightly. "I don't care about these. As long as you're by my side, that's all I need." My nose felt a little sore, and I murmured, "Ethan, let's have a baby." Ethan was a little worried. "But your health?" I shook my head vigorously. "It's okay, for you, I'm willing to try. Even if I walk through the gates of hell, I'm not afraid. Anyway, I've already walked through the gates of hell once. But last time, I trusted the wrong person. This time, I will never miss it again, and I will not leave any regrets." 8. The matter of having a baby was temporarily put on hold. Even though I really wanted to, Ethan took me to see Dr. G, who said that my heart meridian was weak, and I had cold constitution and blood stasis. If I wanted to have a baby, I had to take good care of myself for 3 months before preparing for pregnancy. On the way back, I pulled Ethan to the milk tea shop and regretted ordering the last cup of milk tea. "I won't drink it after this cup, for the sake of our child." Ethan smiled at me helplessly. The clerk asked me what flavor I wanted. "A cup of osmanthus ice cream black tea, no ice. I love this brand of milk tea the most. This is their new product this year, and I haven't tried it yet." Ethan frowned slightly. "Why are you drinking something cold again?" "Ice is delicious." I brought the straw close to his mouth. "Take a sip and try it." He reached out and rubbed my hair, and although he was still frowning, he reluctantly lowered his head and took a sip. The young couple behind us covered their mouths and snickered. This is Ethan. Even after 8 years, he still responds to my every request and never refuses. But he had to leave soon. The company had a meeting. He wanted to take me home himself, but I didn't want to be as willful as before, so I told him that I would go back to school by myself. Although he was a little worried, time was tight, so he told me to be careful and got into the car, turning his head back every few steps. It was only a few hundred meters from here to school. I decided to walk over. Blowing the cool breeze, I wanted to sort out my thoughts. But I didn't expect to see Chase Evans again at the school gate. 9. Scarlett. I didn't want to deliberately disturb you, I just wanted to return these to you. He was wearing cheap casual clothes, seeming to overlap with his appearance in high school, but there was less casualness between his eyebrows and a little more vicissitudes of life. He was holding a large box, which contained all kinds of gifts that I gave him during high school. Speakers, headphones, watches, all famous brands, which I bought for him with the lucky money I had saved for many years. For Chase Evans, these things were valuable, but for me, they were just a pile of garbage. And a pile of garbage that had been sealed for many years, outdated and rotten. I glanced at it lightly, throw it away. Also, don't come looking for me again, or I'll call the police. You know, I've already let you off once yesterday. Thinking of the incense, Chase Evans's face flushed a little, and he lowered his head and didn't dare to say anything. After putting down the box, he turned and left. The security guard in the booth watched us for a long time and hurried over after seeing him walk away. Teacher Sue, are you okay? Who is that man? I've seen him a few times before, walking around our school gate sneakily. I thought he was a thief, but I didn't expect him to be your friend, Teacher Sue. Are these things still useful? Shall I help you move them in? I shook my head, no need, please help me throw them away, thank you. Hey, Teacher Sue, what are you saying? Mr. Smith takes such good care of our school, don't be polite. I watched the security guard move away the box, and looked back at the man's back. He walked slowly, and occasionally his pants were wet by the sewage splashed by passing student bicycles, but he just looked at it and didn't dare to stop people to question them. Lingering many times? He was of course doing it on purpose. The reunion from the beginning was a conspiracy. But the fact that he reappeared today proved that he had not given up on this conspiracy. I made a call to a private detective. Hello, help me keep an eye on someone. 10. The next few days were a bit boring. Because Ethan was on a business trip, and I was the only one left at home. If it was early, he would be back in a week, and if it was late, it might take half a month. I invited my best friend out for afternoon tea and asked her about the preparations for pregnancy. My best friend smiled teasingly, I knew it, how could your husband really be childless with you with so many assets? I originally thought he couldn't do it, but it turns out that he really spoils you. You, how can you be so lucky? My face was slightly red, get serious. Okay, the dignified Mrs. Smith still needs my help, so of course I have to serve you. My best friend said, counting her fingers and breaking it down for me. Actually, you don't need to prepare too much during pregnancy preparation. You should start taking folic acid, the XX brand is better, although it's a bit expensive, it's just a drop in the bucket for you. There are many things to prepare after pregnancy. Someone will prepare the nutritional products for you anyway, and then remember to change to skincare products with simpler ingredients, and buy a pregnancy pillow. Pregnancy pillow? I asked in confusion, are there special pillows for pregnant women? Of course, it's so inconvenient to have a big belly. My best friend took out her phone, searched for it, and showed me the picture, here, like this. My heart tightened. Half a year ago, I had also seen such a pillow on the sofa in Ethan's office. He told me at the time that he was too busy at work during that time and had a sore back, so he bought it casually. My best friend saw that I was suddenly silent and felt a little puzzled, what's wrong? I shook my head and smiled, changing the subject. After returning home, I received a call from a private investigator and received an email reminder. I opened it, and inside was a telephone recording, which should have been recorded with a bug, but it was very clear. However, Chase Evans' voice sounded a little anxious. She seems to have noticed something is wrong. I can't get close to her at all now. She gives me a cold shoulder as soon as she sees me and says she'll call the police. I might need you to help me create some more opportunities. This task is really difficult. You should understand it best, right? Even if a woman faces you every day, it's rare for them to be so easily hooked by outside men. On the other end of the phone, a particularly familiar and calm voice drilled into my ears, making me feel an unprecedented bone-chilling coldness. I've already given you opportunities. The last half month, if you still can't do it. These 20 million, if you don't earn them, there are plenty of people who want to. 11. It was Ethan. His voice was the most familiar to me. The only difference was that he always used a gentle and slow tone when facing me, every word and sentence was about my concern and care. When he was working, his tone would be like just now, calm and capable, beyond doubt. He was contacting Chase Evans. He was letting Chase Evans seduce me, step by step towards the abyss. But why would he do this? Did he know about Chase Evans' subsequent plan? Or was that his plan as well? That pregnancy pillow with a strange meaning appeared in my mind again. But the way he knelt in front of my tombstone and cried loudly on the 7th day after my death, as helpless as a child, and the bouquet of white roses that contrasted sharply with the yellow mud, popped up in front of my eyes again. Which one was the real him? I thought about it all night and a days, sometimes wondering, in pain to the point of headache, and sometimes falling asleep unconsciously, only to be awakened by nightmares. The next morning, I came to school with a pair of dark circles under my eyes. But I didn't walk in. Instead, I searched for that figure at the school gate. As expected, Chase Evans appeared again, sneakily, and was stunned on the spot when he saw me, seeming not to know how to react. "Scarlett, I just want to watch you from afar." I walked up to him expressionlessly and stared at him. This person was indeed very different from what he was a dozen years ago. Although his appearance had not changed much, he had obviously been devastated by reality to the point that he had almost no strength left. There was only a trace of brilliance left in his eyes, which seemed to be the only chance and hope he could grasp now. That was me. "Chase Evans, let's talk." 12. In the corner of the dimly lit coffee shop on a weekday, there were not many people. Chase Evans watched me order, with a hint of surprise in his eyes. "I didn't expect you would still be willing to see me." I didn't speak, just twitched the corners of my mouth. The bitter coffee entered my throat, but I didn't think it was that bitter. It didn't seem to be much worse than that cup of osmanthus ice cream black tea. I really didn't mean to follow you on purpose. I really had a hard time after you transferred schools. I know that everyone thinks I'm not worthy of you, but I want to tell the truth. I really wanted to study hard back then, find a good job, and become someone who could stand shoulder to shoulder with you in the future. It's just that God doesn't seem to want to give me this opportunity. Now I don't ask for anything else. As long as I can see you from afar and know that you are doing well, I will be at ease." Chase Evans said softly about his longing and regret over the years. If it had been in my previous life, I might have really been moved. But now I don't have the patience to listen to too much. With a ding, I threw the coffee spoon into the cup at random, making a crisp sound. Chase Evans's words stopped abruptly, and he looked at me with some incomprehension. "Speak." I said coldly. "What is Ethan's plan? What did he promise you?" 13. As soon as the words fell, Chase Evans's face turned pale. You. I looked directly into his eyes, watching the light of hope in his eyes extinguish little by little, still silently waiting for his answer. After about a few minutes, Chase Evans gave up in general and said softly, "I can't say. If I say it, I won't be able to live. If you don't say it, you won't be able to live either." I reached out and tapped on the table, the imperial green bracelet hitting the glass panel, very dazzling. "Anyway, as long as I don't take your bait, once your mission fails, guess what he will do to you?" Chase Evans was shocked and stared at me with wide eyes. Yes, Ethan has always been a person who does things meticulously. If Chase Evans fails to get me for a long time, given Ethan's style, he will definitely find a way to silence him to eliminate future troubles. "It's okay if you don't say it, how about I guess?" I chuckled softly, feeling more bitter in my heart with every word I said. "He wants you to seduce me into cheating, rekindle the old flame with you, and then divide his property in half and marry you. Then, I will marry you, and what I get from him will become ours. After that, I will die unexpectedly, right? As my legal husband, you will inherit all my inheritance. Anyway, I am already alone." Finally, I took a deep breath before slowly saying, "What will happen in the end? Do you want me to continue?" Chase Evans's forehead was already covered in cold sweat. He licked the corner of his mouth and asked me in a very low voice, "How did you know?" "You don't need to worry about it." "Okay, I'll say it." 14. Chase Evans told me that after he inherited my inheritance, Ethan would send him to overseas casinos. They would use this method to turn the money in Chase Evans' pocket back into Ethan's. After the matter was completed, Ethan would arrange for him to immigrate to a country where extradition was not possible, and give him $20 million to solve his family's problems, so that he could spend the rest of his life abroad with peace of mind. Of course, this was what Ethan promised him. But whether he would still have the rest of his life after he went out, or not, was another matter. Chase Evans covered his face in pain. "I don't want to do this either, but I really have no choice. I'm just a bum. I can still bully people at school, but when I get to society, no one will think highly of me. My dad has uremia, and dialysis is very expensive, you know. My mom was just diagnosed with advanced breast cancer, and I don't know if she can live, but at least there's some hope if she has surgery. But the surgery fee is not a small amount either. My sister, she's had 3 abortions, and I don't know where her future is. Maybe it'll rot like me. I just want to fight for myself and my family. Abnormal death during marriage, the spouse is the first suspect, so Ethan can't do this kind of thing himself. Even Ethan's usual contact with Chase Evans is through the phone of a food delivery man. Each number and location are different every time, so it's impossible to find out. But I still had questions. Why did he want me to die? Chase Evans wiped his face. Promotion, wealth, and dead wife, the 3 great happy events of middle-aged men. You should have heard of it, right? 8 years, even a celestial being will get tired of it. Even if you divorce him, you still have to take away half of his property. That's billions of dollars, not just a few bucks. Who can bear to part with it? Besides, you never gave him a child. That's right, children. 15. But Chase Evans didn't know that those billions of dollars were what I deserved. Ethan's father and my father were old colleagues. They were both at the research institute, but in that era, they encouraged people to go into business, so Mr. Smith resigned and opened his own company. Later, the company had some scale, but because of technical reasons, it could never compete with other big factories. In the year of my graduation, my father introduced Ethan to me. He was handsome, rich, and polite, the best spouse sought after by many girls. But he was only affectionate to me. After the engagement, my father got kidney cancer, and my mother died early, so I couldn't handle it alone. Ethan took my place and went to the hospital every day to visit my father, taking care of him carefully, doing even better than a professional caregiver. Before his death, my father gave him his life's research, requiring him to marry me and take good care of me for the rest of my life. After the marriage, thanks to the technical upgrades, Ethan's company began to grow rapidly. But in just 8 years, he actually wanted to break the contract. I warned Chase Evans, "You shouldn't be stupid enough to let Ethan know that I came to see you, right?" Chase Evans shook his head like a rattledrum, "Of course. Okay, then wait for my news." After speaking, I picked up my bag and left the coffee shop. It was already raining lightly outside, and the sky was gloomy. I randomly hailed a car and went directly to Ethan's company. 16. Mrs. Smith. The secretary was a little surprised to see me, because I rarely took the initiative to come to the company. In everyone's perception, I liked flower arranging, art exhibitions, and everything beautiful and fun, but I would never like to come to this company building, which was full of urgency as soon as you walked in. "Hello." I had a faint smile on my face. "I have some things in Ethan's office, I'm here to get them." The secretary didn't doubt him and took me into the president's office. I looked around, the pregnancy pillow was gone, but I could still find some clues. They were all things I had never noticed before. For example, the fresh orchids on his desk, the hand-painted mouse pad that was placed under the keyboard but still revealed a corner, 2 worn toy cars in the depths of the drawer, and a bottle of children's face cream in the corner under the bookshelf. I turned to ask the secretary, "Has a child been to this office?" The secretary was stunned for a moment, then replied, "President Jane sometimes brings her child to the company, and they come in to play for a while." I nodded lightly. Janie, head of overseas market, returned to China for a few days every month, and always brought her child with her. So coincidentally, Ethan's business trip this time was also abroad. Or rather, this shouldn't be considered a business trip, but should be considered a family trip? 17. Chase Evans has been having a hard time these days. He kept sending me messages, but I never replied. He said, "Actually, your couple's affairs shouldn't involve me, right? He has only given me a sum of money so far, I can find a way to pay it back to you, can you please not involve me? After all, I haven't done anything yet, have I? Scarlett, I know I'm wrong. For the sake of our past relationship, please let me go, okay? As long as you don't expose things, you can do whatever you want to me, I beg you." It seemed that he was really afraid of being known by Ethan. I was too lazy to pay attention to him, because I had other things to do. I sold that bracelet and exchanged it for $8 million. Then, I transferred all the money to a private investigator, who took people abroad overnight. Money makes the world go round, and soon, I received some videos and photos. In the video, Ethan was taking Janie and a 2-year-old boy to build a castle on the beach. They also celebrated the child's 2nd birthday, the luxury of which was comparable to the scene of our wedding. He embraced Janie and kissed her passionately on the deck of the cruise ship. The suspender skirt of that person was full of wrinkles by him, a look of uncontrollable appearance. Compared to the gentleness and restraint he treated me, it can be said that there was much more passion. I found the right time, and at 3 o'clock in the morning abroad, I went online and publicly exposed their power and sex trade and real name. The graphic exposure information instantly detonated the search engine. Because of the patent given by my father, I still had 18% of the company's shares, and I sold them all at a low price. Then, I unilaterally announced the divorce. 18. Half an hour later, I received a call from Ethan. His voice was no longer calm, but a little trembling. "Scarlett, calm down, I'm already on my way to the airport, there are some things I want to talk to you about in person. Is it necessary?" I was in front of the computer, sorting out all the phone recordings that Chase Evans had given me. Fortunately, he was still somewhat intelligent, knowing to record when contacting Ethan. It seemed that he originally planned to use this to bind Ethan, so that they could be on the same boat for life, so that he could spend the rest of his life in peace after escaping abroad. After giving me those things, I promised Chase Evans that I would not let Ethan have a chance to make trouble for him. And the other end of the phone was silent for a long time, and then said, "Scarlett, I'm sorry, I know some things you can't forgive. But you should be able to appreciate how I treated you these 8 years. Besides, the company is the joint effort of our two families." "I know. If it weren't for the fact that the company still has a share of mine, you wouldn't have wanted me to die." After I finished speaking, I packed all the evidence and sent it to the lawyer. "Ethan, between you and me, it's over." 19. Ethan was taken away by the police as soon as he got off the plane. Janie went crazy in front of me for this. The strong woman, who has always been calm and decisive, was scolding me in the company's lobby like a mad woman at this moment. "Su Chien, you are crazy. What good will it do to you if you do this to him? It's you who refuse to have children, refuse to give him a peaceful and happy marriage, and it's also you who only knows how to enjoy everything he brings you all day long, but doesn't think about sharing a shred for him. Now, you actually want to destroy him, destroy all his hard work over the past 8 years? Are you still human? Don't you really miss the slightest bit of his goodness to you?" I looked at her, and slowly, I smiled. Good? Good enough that he wanted to hire someone to kill me in order to get rid of me? Good enough that he cheated me for 8 years and ruined my life in order to get my father's patent? Good enough that he put a green hat on my head, had an illegitimate child, and still wanted me to break up with him peacefully and not take a penny from him? I pointed at Janie's pale face. "If you want this kind of goodness, then take it." Janie looked at me with an unbelievable expression. After a long time, she seemed to be exhausted and slowly fell to the ground. I was too lazy to pay attention to her because the people from the tax bureau had arrived. When hair grows too much, it will always grow lice. The accounts of the Smith Group couldn't be that clean either. The group exploded. The president and a female subordinate were involved in a power-sex trade within marriage, embezzled public funds, and most importantly, were suspected of hiring a murderer. The Smith Group's stock price plummeted overnight, and the part 1 sold earlier actually made a profit. After that, the tax audit gave Ethan a heavy blow. Such a large company disintegrated in an instant. In addition, Chase Evans disappeared. Half a month later, his body was salvaged by fishermen on the coast. It turned out that before Ethan boarded the plane back home, he actually jumped over the wall in desperation and really did something to hire a murderer. He probably didn't expect that Chase Evans had already given me all the recordings. On the day Ethan was sentenced to death, Janie also went completely crazy, and the child was sent to Janie's hometown. And I, holding the remaining $60 million in my hand, resigned from my job and boarded a plane abroad alone. For the rest of my life, I just wanted to see the scenery and taste the food. Then find a quiet and beautiful place and grow old slowly. 20. Scarlett. I was gently shaken awake. Opening my eyes, the movie had already closed, and the audience in the theater had almost left. Ethan was looking at me with a smile. Finally awake? Sleeping like a little pig. The Ethan in front of me was still that handsome face, but with a hint of youthfulness, wearing a casual knitted shirt, looking a little familiar. This was my first date with him. Because neither of us had any dating experience, Ethan chose an art film, but I didn't give him face and directly fell asleep watching it. I rubbed my neck, and memories flooded into my mind, and the way I looked at Ethan slowly became wary from the initial confusion. "Let's go, I'll take you to dinner." Ethan didn't seem to notice anything, but just took my hand, protected my shoulders, and took me out of the cinema. There was a milk tea shop at the entrance of the cinema, which was my favorite brand. "Do you want to drink it?" Seeing that I was staring at it, Ethan took the initiative to ask, "I'll buy you a cup." I turned to look at him and smiled lightly. "Okay." Ethan gently reached out and touched my long hair, then walked over. "Hello, a cup of osmanthus ice cream milk tea, no ice." The clerk was stunned when she heard this and looked up at him. "Sir, I'm sorry, we don't have this new product." At that moment, I saw Ethan's back stiffen slightly. Bonus chapter 1. On the day I was approved for arrest, I fainted in front of everyone. The media reported that Ethan Smith, the president of the leading enterprise in the industry, was arrested on suspicion of murder and fainted on the spot due to excessive emotional fluctuations and was sent to the hospital. Only I knew that I had a long dream. In the dream, she was still by my side. On our first date, she leaned on my shoulder without any precautions and fell asleep in the dark cinema, the gentle breathing beside her neck stirring my heartstrings, which had not had the slightest fluctuation for many years. I looked at her profile and thought, okay, let it be her. Beautiful, simple, with a clean family background, knowing the details, she was the best candidate for the future Mrs. Smith. So, we got engaged. Professor Su dragged his sick body to attend the engagement banquet. He held my hand tightly and said to me solemnly, "Take care of Yen Yen." She was Professor Su's only daughter, his only child with his deceased wife in this life. For this daughter, Mrs. Su paid the price of her life in dystocia, and Professor Su was willing to give everything he could give in this life. As he wished, I gave Su Qian a grand wedding and 1/5 of the original shares of Smith Group. In exchange for a gentle and decent wife, and the important capital for the company to become a first-tier manufacturer. In the second week after the wedding, Professor Su died of post-operative infection after many unsuccessful rescues. Before his death, he finally signed the patent transfer agreement. At the funeral, she leaned on my shoulder, silent, and tears soaked my suit. I gently patted her back. "I'm here." She nodded silently. We both understood that from now on, I would be her only relative for the rest of her life. But she was afraid to have children because of her mother's death. But it didn't matter, we were still young, I thought, we still had plenty of opportunities. Until 5 years later, before the company went public, my father was seriously ill, and my uncle wanted to arrange for 2 cousins to enter the company. He raised his chin in front of all the shareholders in the conference room and said, "HN, I know that you and your wife have a good relationship, but without children, even the best relationship is useless. You have to consider it for all of us Smiths. Do you want to hand over the group to outsiders in the future?" For the first time, I faced a so-called difficult situation. Until Jane E., who had just taken office as the chief financial officer at the time, said lightly, "Who said that senior brother doesn't have children?" 2. As the only heir of Smith Group, in case of emergency, I had already gone abroad to do sperm freezing procedures under my father's arrangement. Janie told me with an apologetic face, "I'm sorry, senior brother, I didn't want to plot against you, and don't blame Assistant Cho, he's also doing it for your own good. I want a child, but I don't want to give birth to a stranger's child, that's all. But if this child can help you, even if you blame me, I won't regret my decision." At that time, she was 3 months pregnant. What's done is done. I rubbed my eyebrows and stayed in the office all night. The next day, I transferred her overseas and sent more people to protect her. After my sick father learned about this, he just sighed, "It's okay. Achin, you must remember that people don't care about themselves, heaven and earth will perish. Sometimes, being too trapped by love will only end up hurting yourself." I didn't speak, but I felt a faint heartache. I didn't know what the situation would be like if she knew about this one day. Before leaving, my father murmured, "Actually, as long as you have a child, I will be relieved. As for who the child's mother is, it doesn't matter." 6 months later, Janie gave birth to a boy abroad. I went to see him in a hurry, and I don't know why, but when I saw the little baby whose eyebrows and eyes were quite similar to mine, I couldn't help but feel a bit softer in my heart. I gave Janie a sum of money, but she returned it. "Senior brother, I gave birth to him for nothing else." Her eyes, which were looking at me, faintly carried some moisture. The strong woman, who had always been decisive, was now so fragile that one wanted to hug her. I didn't know why, but I felt a little guilty and turned my face away and said, "Thank you." Later, Janie lived alone with her child and poured all her love into this child, as she said, without seeking fame or fortune. In comparison, I, the biological father, did very little. Although I knew that no one would be stupid enough to bring this matter to Su Qian's face, I still had hidden worries in my heart. I knew that paper could not contain fire. Therefore, I became more and more kind to her. We became a model couple in everyone's eyes, with a deep and unquestioning love for each other. Until one day, Janie called me crying, saying that the child had injured his head and had been sent to the hospital. I went abroad overnight, and I saw the child's head wrapped in thick gauze. As soon as Janie saw me, she threw herself into my arms and cried loudly. It turned out that other older children in the day-care center beat him when the teacher was not paying attention, mocking him as a bastard without a father. The poor 1.5-year-old child couldn't even speak clearly, and it was not until Janie returned home and found the child vomiting non-stop that she hurried him to the hospital. The doctor diagnosed that the child had a skull fracture and needed to be taken care of. I stayed abroad with them for half a month in the name of a business trip. When the child's condition finally stabilized, on the last night before leaving, I still gave Janie a sum of money. But she returned the money again, looked up at me, her eyes seeming to have a plea, "Senior brother, I want to use this 10 million that you gave me to buy you to have a drink with me tonight, okay?" After 3 bottles of dry white wine, she finally couldn't help but cry loudly, telling me about the hardships of her being pregnant and giving birth alone for the past 2 years, telling me about her emotions that she had suppressed in her heart for many years. This time, perhaps touched by something, or perhaps due to the influence of alcohol, I didn't push her away again. 3. In the next 6 months, I frequently went on business trips to see the child, and also to see the child's mother. I finally began to get used to the existence of another home, no longer needing to wallow in alcohol with Jane E. But I knew that this was not a long-term solution. Before his death, my father also flew over to take a look at the child. Holding the child, a rare warm smile appeared on his tired and old face, but after the child was taken away, his eyes turned cold again. "Achan, it's time to cut the knot quickly." I nodded lightly. I have already contacted a lawyer, but the issue of property division still needs to be carefully studied. My father shook his head and sighed upon hearing this. I understood what he was regretting. Even the lawyer couldn't help but feel sorry for me. TSK, this is 3 or 4 billion. Even I couldn't help but worry. Once this money was given away, if the Smith Group didn't have any accidents in the next 2 years, it would be fine, but in case something happened, the break in the chain of funds would bring a series of chain reactions, causing the group to fall into a major crisis. But if I didn't give it, would she agree? After another bout of wallowing, Janie leaned in my arms and asked me softly, "Senior brother, are you still reluctant?" Reluctant? Maybe there was. But I couldn't turn back anymore. Actually, everyone will have such a period. Even Su Qian, not wanting to have children, it's not necessarily because of Mrs. Su's death. My eyebrows jumped, and I couldn't help but feel a little angry in my heart. You know I don't like people who gossip. But Janie showed me a few photos. That was Su Qian in her teenage years, with a bright smile that I had never seen, but she was holding another man's hand. Later, I learned that that person was called Chase Evans. The love of a teenage girl, an ending that ended without success, an unforgettable memory for life. Thinking of this, I felt an unnamed fire erupting in my chest, burning fiercely. Janie returned to her calm and efficient style at work and said to me, "Senior brother, maybe I have a way to make her take the initiative to divorce." 4. Janie kept her word. 3 months later, Su Qian filed for divorce from me and was willing to divide less property. I wanted to grab her hand and say no, not allowed to go with that man. But in the end, I just tightly grabbed the armrest of the chair. I heard myself gritting my teeth and saying, "Okay." She looked at me with some guilt for a long time before picking up her bag and leaving. But Janie's goal was not just this. I heard her finish the call with Chase Evans using a voice changer outside the study. She explained to Chase Evans, "Those 20 billion are not something you can take, do your job well. Afterwards, in addition to the 20 million, I will also take care of the rest of your life and your family." I opened the door and looked at her coldly. Janie's eyes had a moment of panic, but she quickly calmed down. She showed me the group's financial statements for the past 2 years, as well as the group's subsequent funding plans. Most importantly, there was also a video. In the video, in the dark carriage, Su Qian's figure was almost intertwined with that man and difficult to separate. At that moment, I didn't know how to describe the feeling in my heart. I thought, perhaps, between her and me, there was only an ending where you died or I died. No matter what the reason, I couldn't accept her surrendering herself to another man. First love or new love, she couldn't belong to other men, not a single one, absolutely not. "Senior brother." Janie grabbed my arm tightly. "There is no one in the Su family, no one will find out." After a long time, I silently closed my eyes and acquiesced to her plan. On the day Su Qian went abroad with Chase Evans, I took one last look at her at the corner of the airport. When we met again, there was only a lonely tombstone left. 5. "Ethan, someone is here to see you." I suddenly opened my eyes, sat up from the simple bed, and was still wearing cold handcuffs on my wrist. I, who had already been sentenced to death, couldn't help but get excited. Would it be her? Unfortunately, it wasn't. The one who came was Janie. She cried as if she was about to break down and said to me, I'm sorry, senior brother, I didn't expect things to develop like this. I'll go and explain to them, Chaninan wasn't killed by you, I did it on my own." "Shut up." I coldly stopped her. How he died was no longer important to me. The previous life in the dream seemed to be still in front of me. Although I finally got everything without any losses, it was still difficult to let go. That kind of pain suppressed deep in my heart continued to take root and sprout in my heart even after I woke up from the dream. In this life, although I don't understand how Su Qian guessed our plan, I was somewhat gratified that she could personally send me to the guillotine. It turned out that she was not the vase people talked about, she could also become smart, ruthless, and sober. Janie cried so hard that she couldn't catch her breath, but I don't want to lose you, and the child can't be without a father. You go. I advised her to leave with a blank expression. Anyway, the child is destined to lose either his father or his mother, so it's better to lose me. Anyway, in the previous life in the dream, even if I had a successful career and a happy family in the long second half of my life, I didn't feel that happy. And I, even if I didn't die, could no longer turn back. In Janie's crazy and painful crying, I turned around and followed the prison guard back to the cramped iron window, frankly accepting the ending that Su Qian had made for me. Half a year later, lying on the bed for lethal injection, I slowly closed my eyes. What would she be doing at this time? I thought I would no longer have the chance to know. And in these 6 months, even if I had looked forward to it countless times in my heart, she had never come to see me once. That was fine, that was fine. I killed her in one life, and she killed me in one life, it was even. But I didn't expect that we could still have a third life. Could it be that God wants to give us a chance to start over? 6. Sorry, sir, we don't have this type of new product. The clerk's reply made my mind, which was originally filled with joy, instantly calm down. The person behind me came over to take a look and looked up to ask me, "What did you order?" It was still that pure pair of eyes when we first met, which made me couldn't help but lower my voice. "It's nothing, I rarely drink milk tea, so I'm not good at ordering." She smiled lightly, "Then let me do it, my taste is very picky, you definitely don't know." When holding the milk tea out of the mall, it was already snowing heavily outside. She shrank her neck and frowned. She has always been cold and afraid of cold. I subconsciously took off my coat and wrapped it around her and strode towards the parking lot. The face of the person in my arms was slightly flushed, and she seemed afraid to look at me, just like back then. It seemed that she didn't get reborn with me. Thinking of this, I couldn't help but breathe a sigh of relief. This was also good, at least it showed that we could really start over. We dated, ate, and chatted like before. The sense of youthfulness she revealed from time to time made my heart, which had been silent for a long time, throb again. Professor Su was still sick, and I took the initiative to take care of him, which made Su Qian feel a strong sense of gratitude towards me. Finally, we finalized the engagement date after Professor Su's second operation. At the same time, I secretly investigated Chen Yinan, using all the means I could think of, forcing him to be burdened with millions of huge debts, and having no way out, he committed suicide by jumping off a building in advance. The hidden danger was eliminated, and our married life became more harmonious than before. Although Janie still entered the company, I was confident that this time, I would not give her a chance to interfere in our marriage. In the second year after the marriage, I coaxed her, "Yan, let's have a child, okay? Just one, whether it's a boy or a girl." Su Qian hesitated and turned back to the room. I saw her pick up the family portrait again, gently stroking the faces of Professor Su and Mrs. Su on the photo, seeming extremely conflicted. I gently hugged her from behind, using retreat as advance. "If you don't want to, forget it." But 3 days later, she seemed to have made a huge decision and said to me, "I promise you, just try once. After giving birth to this one, never again." I suppressed the feeling of ecstasy in my heart, hugged her hard into my arms, buried my head in her neck, greedily smelling the orange blossom fragrance on her body, and said solemnly, "Okay, just once." 7. After 3 months of conditioning, she was finally pregnant. This good news instantly spread throughout the Su family, and even the employees in the company were secretly discussing me, saying that the president, who had always been cold and heartless, was always beaming with joy recently, which made people happy to see him. During this period, I treated Su Qian like a pearl and a treasure, afraid of letting her suffer a bit, and almost took care of everything in her life personally. These details were seen by everyone, including Janie. I could notice that she began to be distracted at work, and occasionally stared at me intently, and also stared at Su Qian when she came to the company to look for me. I talked to her privately, "Your ability is good, but you'd better focus on your work. If you are willing, you can go to the overseas market to gain experience." She was more direct than I thought. "Senior brother, you want to drive me away?" I didn't speak, threw the pen on the table, and lowered my face. "If you are not willing, I can also introduce you to be the chief assistant in Yaxing Group." She finally chose to compromise. "Okay. Please give me some time to handle the work at hand." This was enough. As long as she stayed away from me and Su Qian, I didn't care where she would go. Happy times always passed quickly, but I was about to usher in an even happier moment. Because Yan was about to give birth. It was just very unlucky that on the day she was about to go into labor, I was sent by her to the old-fashioned dim sum shop in the west of the city to buy her favorite chestnut osmanthus cake. The west of the city was an old district, and I was unwilling to come, but she kept chanting that she wanted it, and insisted that I go there myself, so I couldn't bear to spoil her interest. I thought that driving back and forth would only take an hour and a half, and it wouldn't delay anything big. It was just that the engine of my car was accidentally damaged that day, so she urged me to drive her electric car out. On the way, I received a call from her, urging me to go to the hospital quickly. She was about to give birth. I couldn't help but feel nervous in my heart, and after responding repeatedly, I stepped on the gas pedal. Therefore, when that pickup truck rushed out diagonally and hit me, I still didn't understand why. The sound of the explosion almost shattered my eardrums, the fire blurred my eyes, and when my skin was burned unbearably, I still subconsciously clutched the bag of osmanthus cake tightly. When Janie, who had been hiding in the dark, saw my face in the fire, she suddenly screamed, dragged me out of the car, regardless of the bloody mess. The noise of the crowd and the sound of ambulances seemed to drift from a far distance, along with Janie's cries. How could this be? How could this be? Heseuchihian. You bitch. I'm sorry, senior brother, I didn't expect things to develop like this. It was her who told me that she was willing to die for you, and asked me if I dared. It was her who bet me that if I had the ability to make her child not be born, she would voluntarily leave and give you to me. I didn't know it was you. Why was it you? Senior brother. I couldn't hear the words behind. Before fainting, only one thought remained in my mind. It turned out that the most painful thing was not never having gotten it, or having already lost it. It was to regain it, but before you could be happy, you had to lose it again. Yen, you won again. 8. 5 years later, in the VIP ward of a private hospital affiliated with the Smith Group, the caregiver was wiping my body. My face was destroyed in the car accident, my brain was damaged, and prolonged fever after the operation caused cerebral edema, which made me completely a walking corpse. For the past 5 years, I had been lying in bed like a piece of wood, unable to move, but I could still perceive everything outside. The door was pushed open, bringing the laughter of children and her, and a scent of roses. She was here again. For the past 5 years, she had been bringing the child to see me every weekend, and by the way, bringing me a bouquet of white roses. People in the hospital praised her a lot. President Sue is really not easy. Knowing that Mr. Smith may not be able to wake up in this life, she is unwilling to give up, raising their 2 children alone, and bringing the child to see him every week. Isn't that right? What's the difference between this and being a widow? I heard that there are a lot of people outside who want to introduce men to her, and there are many excellent young men who are rushing to be a stepfather, but she didn't even look at them. Hey, I heard a long time ago that their couple had a deep relationship, and it really is so. The caregiver turned her head to see her and immediately put on a smiling face. President Sue, you're here. Yeah. Su Qian responded softly, and then took the towel from the caregiver as before and wiped my face, which was already tattered. My son's voice rang out beside him. Mom, when will Dad wake up? I don't know. Su Qian replied lightly, but it doesn't matter, even if Dad can't wake up in this life, Mom will stay with him with you. Our family will always be together. She inherited the Smith Group, took over everything that belonged to me, and she was not as fragile as the outside world imagined. But that day, she also brought me another message. After my son fell asleep on the sofa while looking at the picture book, she gently stroked my hair, leaned down, and came to my ear. Ethan, I have already arranged your father's funeral for you, just like you arranged it for my father back then, decent and glorious. Your son, as the only legitimate heir of the Smith family, helped him hold the portrait. Janie has also been released, but it's a pity, she's already crazy and can't come to see you anymore. Don't blame me either, after all, I just drove her crazy, but you forced Janinan's whole family to a dead end. But don't worry, I will still stay with you. After all, I am not from your Smith family. I can't do such a thing as letting a caregiver with disease spread the virus shortly after the patient's surgery. I stared at her with wide eyes, and the corners of my eyes began to get wet, but unfortunately I couldn't speak. But she just smiled at me, while cutting off the weeds of the bouquet of white roses, and then inserting them into the vase one by one. The breeze came in from the window, bringing the spring, setting off all the beauty in this room except me. Finally, I closed my eyes wearily.